These are the live internet studies. My name is Ari Ben Lyman Hanavi. This is episode number 225, and the first segment is entitled Eschatology, a Biblical Study of End Time Events. We are talking about topic number 7, Excursus, the Islamic Antichrist per Joel Richardson. This is not an expose on Islam. I want to make sure you understand my intent of dealing with the material at hand. The Bible describes Satan and the different earthly kingdoms that Satan has utilized down through history, down through mankind's history, to try and thwart God's plans of establishing his kingdom here on earth through his agents, through his leaders, through God's people. And so Satan, who, as far as I can tell, doesn't know all of history like God does, but nevertheless has a higher intelligence than most humans, Satan has decided to step in and throw a monkey wrench into God's plans, starting with the fall in the garden and the temptation of our first parents. But going from there, Satan has decided to try and thwart God's plans at every step, whether it's to murder the Messiah that God would send, right, that God promised throughout all of the Tanakh, the Old Testament. Satan tried to destroy that line, knowing that he would come from the lineage of a certain man, Abraham. And of course, we're talking about the introduction of Israel and Jewish people. Satan sought then to bring in kingdoms and utilize their disbelief in God and their wickedness to his advantage. So we're talking about Islam to the degree that there is every possibility that Satan will once again decide to utilize a religion that is other than Christianity to disrupt God's plans and to bring about pain and persecution of God's people and confusion on planet Earth. So we're not trying to say that Islam is the big bad evil. We're not trying to say that Muslims are bad people or that they're all lost and going to hell or something to that effect. So don't misunderstand any things that I'm talking about. We're just talking about a Bible topic of the Antichrist to the degree that Islam has an eschatology that overlaps with biblical eschatology, end-time events, and the very strong probability that Islam will be a key player in the end-time scenario when we're talking about Israel in the Middle East and the incursions that are going to happen against Israel and her neighbors, who's going to be on the table of discussion of, Israel battling who. And if you look at the Middle East map today, Israel is surrounded by Muslim, Arab countries, neighbors, people groups. So the religion is Islam there predominantly in that part of the world. And the people groups are predominantly either Arabic or other nationalities that are non-Western, non-European, fill in the blank. So that's why we're looking at these particular topics. So you see on your screen right now, topic 7, Excursus, Islamic Antichrist. Last week, I whet your appetite with my own kind of overview of the parallels and contrasts between the 3 major, what are called signs by Islamic teachers, Islamic specialists, people who do these types of studies. These 3 signs or 3 figures, they're alternately they're called signs, but that are expected by Muslims thinkers are the Islamic Mahdi, or you can say Mahdi, and then we have the Muslim Jesus, Isa, and then we have the Dajjal. And so of those 3 figures, we learned last week that 2 of those figures are considered by Islamic teachers as good guys in the story. I remember I gave us a kind of humorous analogy of Batman and Robin, right? The dynamic duo. They are good guys. They're heroes. They're superheroes. And yet one is clearly in higher rank than the other. Batman is higher in rank in the comics than Robin is. Robin is the junior. Robin is his sidekick. It's really all about Batman, and then Robin comes along as an assistant. Well, that's kind of the same thing. The Mahdi is the Batman, fill in my analogy. He's the primary player, and the Muslim Jesus Isa is his sidekick, is the one who assists him in doing his duty. And so they're the good guys. And then in the Islamic eschatology, the Dajjal is the bad guy. He's the Joker of the story. He's the villain of the piece, the antagonist. He's the one that comes along and fights against the superheroes. And even in Islamic eschatology, the good guys win. Right? They defeat the bad guy. So, just like in the comic books, the Joker ends up getting defeated by Batman and Robin, but not without some battles and some struggles and some bloodshed. So, when we look at the parallels between Islamic eschatology and the parallels to biblical figures, we've got the Antichrist, we've got the false prophet, and then we've got Yeshua himself. Of course, in biblical fashion, the Antichrist is also has his what we call sidekick, false prophet, but in the biblical narrative, the purposes are reversed, right? The Antichrist and the false prophet are bad guys. They're villains of the piece. They're figures that show up on the scene that seek to do harm and destruction to planet Earth, and ultimately they have a measured amount of success in doing that. They're going to wear out the saints. They're going to lay siege to Jerusalem. They're going to impose the mark of the beast, and a lot of bloodshed is going to happen as a result of these two figures in the Bible. But then, similar to Islamic story, there's a good guy who comes along, Jesus Christ himself. He's the champion, right? He's God's main player in the story, and he comes along and liberates planet Earth from the bad guys, right? He defeats the bad guys. They get kicked out of the ring, right? Jesus is declared the champion, right? So it's interesting that Satan uses the narrative that of these players in the Islamic model, the eschatology, as to us as Christians, he would use them as what we might call a counterfeit version. So I've heard of other teachers say it this way: the Islamic savior is the biblical Antichrist. So you understand how that was working out? So there's kind of a one-to-one correlation there between those figures. So we looked at that last week, and go back and listen to my last week's study if you're confused. What we're going to do now is begin to transition into the book that the gentleman on the screen that you can see on your screen right now, Joel Richardson himself, literally wrote the book. Let me just show you the book. Here's a screenshot of Amazon.com. It's called The Islamic Antichrist by Joel Richardson. He's a Christian author, and he put the book together some time ago, and I've read the book myself, and you can buy it from Amazon there. It's not too terribly expensive. If you want to support Mr. Richardson's ministry, then here's a way to pick up the book and do that. But Joel Richardson is so gracious that he has made this resource available for free, and there's a few ways you can get to it. As I mentioned last week, you can go to his website at joelstrumpet.com, and I put this link in the video link in the description below. You can see a link to these as well. You can, as well as the Amazon link as well, the book there. But if you go to his website and click on the free resources link and begin to scroll down, you can see right away there the Islamic Antichrist shows up right there, and it shows up in many, many languages. So feel free to avail yourself of those free resources that Joel has made available for us. Likewise, there is a web resource ministry known as Answering Islam. And I think it's answeringislam.org, yes. And from there, there are various teachers who contribute to the different resources, and one of those contributing authors is Joel Richardson again, and he has taken his book and turned it into web version, so it's not a PDF document or anything like that. It's HTML standard web page, and you can click on the book and read it right there online for free. Before we jump into the book, let me just again remind you of the other resources that I'm interacting with. I put these links in my video, in my description of the video below, and then we'll jump into the study. But along with Mr. Richardson, a helpful resource that I myself can recommend is Christian pastor John MacArthur. He has a sermon on this same topic about the last days scenario involving Islam and a Muslim presence in the earth, and how Christianity has to contend with the fact that Islam is the fastest growing religion on earth, and by even the estimates of many specialists in this area, perhaps maybe in as little as 20 years, Islam may be the top religion in the world. the majority religion in the world today, having a very strong presence in many, many countries, including Western countries, not just the Middle East. But that's something that every Christian should take notice of. So based on that reality, you can give Pastor John MacArthur a listen, or you can watch the video, you can play the audio, or you can just read the transcript of the sermon there in its entirety right there. Again, a free resource, which is great. Fits everybody's budget. Another resource that I would point you in the direction of is Zion's Hope, a Christian ministry with a messianic outlook. As you can hear it in their name, Zion's Hope, very pro-Israel in that regard. And they have a lot of resources in regards to this area as well. If you go to their YouTube channel, youtube.com/@zionshope.org, and you begin to scroll down. If you look for either through the videos or the playlist, or use the search option, you can see, let me kind of zoom in a little bit there. You can see they've got videos on this particular topic: Islamic eschatology, Islamic Antichrist, etc., etc. And then moving into that same area of prophecy, dealing with Islam's place in the end time. I mentioned last week, my own personal favorite, Tim Hague at TorahResource.com has a study on the book of Daniel that you can purchase by way of audio and video. And he also brings up this topic about how that Islam is a very real possibility and probability of an end time major player. And then lastly, but certainly not leastly, is that how it really works? Lastly, but not leastly? No, I think it's last but not least. I have my own good friend and partner in crime, Rabbi Ed of Beth El Gibor. Let me zoom in there as well. He has a video that he put out fairly recently, within the last 2 weeks, called Radar Apologetics on Air. Radar Apologetics is the name of his YouTube channel. Antichrist in Islam. The first 20 minutes of that hour-and-a-half long study is given over to this particular topic. So find him on YouTube. Look up Radar Apologetics or Rabbi Ed. You can find it either way. But I recommend it. And again, all of these links are in the description below. So having said all of that, let's jump now into our study. We're going to be using Mr. Richardson's material here from this point forward for the next few weeks at least. Let's begin to look at his notes. I want to start, actually, rather than jumping into the chapter, which I'm going to be utilizing, which is, I think, chapter 5 of his book. I want to start by reading part of the conclusion of I think it's either the introduction or it might be the first chapter. And the topic was, let me just scroll up real quick, and you see it is chapter 1, why this book, Waking Up to the Islamic Revival. So why would we even have this particular study? What is its relevancy to Christians? And as I mentioned earlier, let me scroll back to where I was. As I mentioned earlier, I don't want you to mistakenly think that this is a study on Islam or a study on Muslim eschatology per se. This is not an expose on Islam for the purpose of showing how evil and twisted their religion is, or expressing my sentiments of how bad Muslims are as a people or anything like that. None of that is factual, okay? Don't misunderstand why I'm giving this particular outlook on this particular topic. It's because of eschatology that I'm bringing this up. It's because of our discussion on Antichrist and the model of Antichrist is seen through the lens of Islam, and how there is a very strong possibility / probability that Islam could be that final beast empire that Satan utilizes to make his last ditch effort to thwart God's plans here on planet Earth. Remember, we've already had in this order Egypt, Assyria, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then in the church age after Rome, in the gap, we have some possibilities of who that could have been. It could have been the Ottoman Empire, which of course where Islam came from, could have been the Russian Federation before they broke up, could have been the Nazi regime led by Hitler himself, or any other number of different players of who that seventh beast empire. But the eighth, we know, will be almost like a composite of all the previous seven. Indeed, the book of Revelation talks about how that the eighth beast is of the seven, yet he himself is an eighth. So it is definitely almost like a combination of these final empires, all consummated under one final wicked ruler, wicked world system that's going to have an impact around the world, just like all the other seven did in some way, shape, or form. So let's look at Mr. Richardson's notes. This is a conclusion to chapter 1. Let's see how this is relevant to us as Christians. So we'll start right here, as you can see on your screen. Joel writes, so maybe you now agree that it is important to become informed regarding Islam, but you may be wondering why it is important to understand Islamic eschatology specifically. Again, otherwise, I myself also, I'm not really interested in Islam. I don't have any reason to discuss Islam on my YouTube channel or anything like that. I don't have any personal beef against them. I don't have any reason to slam their religion and throw them under a bus. Obviously, I differ with their theology, right? There are many aspects of their religion that are contrary to the biblical worldview. And my understanding as a messianic Jewish man who believes in the Trinity. So yeah, we have our strong differences, but other than that, they're just good-loving people who want to live their lives peaceably. Most of Muslims that I know any personally that I can think of off the top of my head. I've met a few, but and as I was discussing with my friend in the chat room before, in the Skype room before we started the study, Islam represents a mission field to us as Christians, right? If we understand that their religion is not the actual true biblical religion, even though they say it is, then to us we realize that they are simply people who are in need of a savior, just like we were before we found Christ. We need to be ready and willing to witness to them as well, as difficult as that might seem to us. So let's keep reading Joel Richardson. He says, it's a good question, right? Why should I study Islamic eschatology specifically? He says, please think through some of these points carefully. Let me see if I can read this without pausing. The Bible makes it clear that the devil's primary plan for the last days has been for the past few thousand years to raise up two men, the Antichrist and the false prophet. And indeed, those are the two major players that I mentioned earlier in both eschatology families or eschatology groups, both Islam and Christianity. And so we got these two men, and Satan uses them as his primary instruments to deceive the inhabitants of the earth. So with this in view, Joel continues. He says, so how do you suppose that Satan has planned to include the world's 1.3 billion Muslims in his grand end-time deception? I've read a few different possibilities myself. Let me see what Joel has to say, and then I'll offer my own suggestions if he doesn't mention the ones that I myself have heard. Joel says, did Satan fail to foresee and strategize regarding the global spread of Islam? Of course, he's asking these rhetorical questions. He knows his answer himself. Or has Satan included the Muslims of the world in his end-time strategy? He asked this question, will Islam, the world's third monotheistic religion, remember there's three Abrahamic religions, monotheistic religions, Christianity, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Will Islam, the world's third monotheistic religion, also undergo the persecution of Satan, along with Christians and Jews, as they all resist the Antichrist together? Or, he says, will Islam, the religion that prides itself in resisting any form of idolatry, right? Resistance is futile. Resisting any form of idolatry, simply submit to a demonic and false religious leader without putting up any real fight?